to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Fernandez. Mrs. Gaddy.
Here.
Mr. Kraus.
Here.
Mrs. Manini.
Here.
Mr. Masiello.
Here.
Mrs. Romano. Here. Mrs. Zuby.
Here.
Thank you. And I'd like a motion if we can accept the agenda, please. Mrs. Gadden, second by Mrs. Zuby. All in favor?
Aye.
Discussion? Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Before board member reports, we're going to have a performance. As you can see, the stage is set up for the North Rockland High School drama performance on Fiddler on the Roof. And I'd ask everyone's attention, and I think you're going to enjoy this.
We'll turn it over to Mrs. Stellato.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. Our high school show is in Tech Week right now. With the snow day yesterday, they lost a day of rehearsal. So we have a trio for you. Fiddler on the Roof opens this Friday night, the 8th. We have performances on the 8th, the 9th, the 14th, 15th, and 16th. All performances are at 7:30. Tickets are $15 for adults and $12 for students and senior citizens. Next Thursday, the 14th, is our student 2-for-1 night. So if a student comes and brings a buddy with them, they each get in for $6 each instead of the $12 each. So that's a nice little savings for them. Fiddler on the Roof is a popular show, and the song that you're going to hear, and this is with Cassidy Prentice O'Dell, Sophia Nardone, and Victoria Romero as the three older sisters of Tevye the Dairyman, and Mr. Block on piano. He's the director of the show, and with the assistance also of Jamie Santillo, who's the vocal director. So without any further ado, here is Matchmaker from Fiddler on the Roof.
Matchmaker, make me a match. Find me a find. Catch me a catch. Matchmaker, look through. And make me the perfect match. Matchmaker, I'll bring the bed. He'll bring the groom. Slender and pale. The air rain for I'm longing to be the ending of all I see. Make him smaller, mama, make him rich as a king for me. Well, I wouldn't holler if he were as handsome as anything. Matchmaker, make me a match. Find me a find, catch me a catch. I have tonight in the dark, I'm alone, so find me a match of my own. Since when are you interested in a match, Pablo? I thought you just had your eye on the books. And you have your eye on the rabbi's son. We only have one rabbi and he only has one son. Why shouldn't I know the best? Because you're a girl from a poor family. So, whatever Yenta brings, you'll take. Right? Of course, right. Huddle, huddle, have I been match for you? He's handsome, he's young, all right, he's 62, but he's a nice man, a good match. True? True. I promise you'll be happy, and even if you're not, there's more to life than that. Don't ask me what. I found him! You really let me cry. He's handsome, he's tall, that is from side to side, but he's a nice man, a good match, right? Right. To her, he has a temper, he'll be here every night, but only when he's sober. So you're all right. Did you think you'd get a glimpse? Well, I do the best I can. With no dowry, no money, no family background. Be glad you got to love them. matchmaker, you know that I'm still very young. Please take your time. To this minute, I misunderstood that we could stop for good. I see that these gentle remembering are also a crime. It's not that I'm sentimental. It's just that I'm terrified. Matchmaker, plan me no plan. I'm in no rush. Baby, I've learned hanging with matches, a girl can get burned. So ring me no ring, thrill me no thrill, find me no find, catch me no catch, unless he's a match, let's match.
Job and performance, the full performance will be this weekend and next weekend at the high school. So if you get the opportunity, don't miss it. It's just a taste. Okay, we're going to go to board member reports. Mr. Fernandez.
Yes, Mr. Masiello, I have a couple items. On March 14th, North Rockland High School will again welcome Mr. Chris Herron, former NBA basketball player, who will speak to the 11th and 12th grade students about his personal struggles with alcohol and drugs. His inspirational message will focus on making positive life choices, making the most out of life, and the importance of treating others with respect and kindness. I believe Mr. Masiello may have a couple of comments on this.
Thank you. I wanted to just mention, I've heard Mr. Herron speak about 4 years ago to the high school, maybe juniors and seniors, and it almost was an hour and 45 minutes speech, and you could hear a pin drop. That's how he commands the attention of these students and what he has to offer them. And as you know, recently there are more drugs, more addictions, and more young people getting caught up in this type of activity, and his message is very powerful, and I'm sure it'll bring home the message to a lot of the young students who, you know, have the opportunity to make the right decisions as they go forward in their journey. So that's just a message for the students and the staff that are able to attend, and administration and any of the board members. It's really a worthwhile presentation. Okay, Mr. Fernandez.
Well, we just saw the Drama Society give us a teaser there, Fiddler on the Roof, years ago. Again, just to reiterate, the show dates are there, March 8th, 9th, 15th, 16th. And if you need to find out additional information, it's available on the North Rockland High School website. On Friday, March 22nd, North Rockland High School PTA will be hosting Pocketbook Bingo. Doors open at 6:30 p.m. There is limited seating, so get your tickets as soon as possible. You can visit the North Rockland High School website for further information, or you can see Mrs. Manini here at the end of the table if you require additional information. The annual North Rockland Sports Day will be held on Saturday, April 13th, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at North Rockland High School. The cost is $5 per family. The proceeds from this event benefit several worthy causes. That's a great time for everyone. Definitely try to make an effort to show up to that. And reminder, we have a district website, as well as every individual school has their own website full of information. We post information on Facebook as well and Twitter. So there's different forms of information available to the public. That's all I have, Mr. Masiello.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Does any other board members have announcements?
Something. As in previous years, unfortunately, it's tax time again. The Academy of Finance students who are trained are assisting the elderly, older folks, and low-income folks in preparing their tax returns. This is being done on Wednesdays. A few have passed already, obviously, but tomorrow, March 6, 13, 20, 27, April 3rd, and April 10th. So it's Wednesdays, 2:30 to 6:30, room 403 in the high school. Please, spread the word, because this has been very helpful. And, this year, as we all know, the tax forms are very different, and these students are up on it.
Thank you, Mr. Kraus. Ms. Gilligan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Masiello. I received an email today from Assemblywoman Ellen Jaffe, who is sponsoring, along with numerous community agencies, a forum for young women from the age of 16 to 21. It's entitled "Tomorrow is Now, Changing the Face of Power in New York State." Our goal: inspire young girls and young women to get involved in the political process. This event will be held on Thursday, March 21st from 5 to 7 p.m. at Rockland Community College. Brett McSweeney is the main presenter from Eleanor's Legacy, which is Eleanor Roosevelt organization. The topics will include leadership development, fundamentals of politics, the essentials for running for office and campaign life, and fundraising and grassroots volunteering. So I am sure, Mrs. Ecker, I will pass this on to you, because I'm sure we have young women at the high school who will probably be interested in this event. Thank you.
Hi, I know that Mr. Fernandez mentioned the dates, as did Mr. Masiello, about the school play, the school musical. I just have a few words, like I always do, regarding the play. I just think that the work that the kids in our district do is absolutely amazing. So you did see 3 young ladies who did just an awesome job. What you don't see is there's between 100 and 150 students that work on the play. And they work on every single aspect of the play, from the brochures, the backstage things, lighting, sound, the design of the stage, helping with costumes, helping with advertising. The pit is a student pit, which is remarkable. I met a young woman the other day who was telling me about a show that they're doing in Westchester, and they have a professional or a teacher pit or a professional pit where they pay. We have our kids, the North Rockland Central School District kids, that come in and play this very challenging music, as well as all the kids that are on stage. So it's just a treat to see all different aspects and talents of the kids in this district, putting it all together, of course, with the amazing teachers that we have, to put on just this great performance. So I encourage you all to come out. $15 a ticket next Thursday, half price for students. It's a bargain. It's right in your neighborhood. It's your neighborhood kids that you see all the time. And again, lighting, sound, kids on stage, everything. It's just amazing to see the work they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Romano. Mrs. Egerly.
Currently, state law allows the BOCES in the state of New York to accept out-of-state tuition students. And Rockland BOCES has, and that law is scheduled to sunset. So I would like to ask the permission of the board for maybe our superintendent and our board president to write up a letter or resolution to be sent to our legislators in support of re-upping that law, because for our local Rockland BOCES, it means over $600,000, because we can have a number of students that come to Rockland BOCES from New Jersey. And it really benefits all the Rockland students too, because it allows classes to run that might not have run because of lack of enrollment. So it's really important for us to get that law. It doesn't cost the state anything, so there's really no downside to the state of New York, and they don't have any money in it. The students who come pay their own way. So, but it really, on the budget side, for all the component districts in Rockland County, it means over $600,000 to the Rockland University budget.
And we'll be happy to do that, Peggy, because it also offsets the administrative fee that the Rockland County districts pay. So by getting that additional out-of-state level revenue, we actually benefit financially also through our administrative fees. So we will work on that.
Okay, I don't know how, do we need a motion to allow you to do it, or? So I'll make a motion that we
Okay.
authorize, the superintendent. and
Okay.
Board president to write a letter on our behalf and send it to our elected.
Okay, we'll recognize that motion in a second.
Second.
By Mr. Cross, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Very welcome. I'll practice my writing skills, but I'll be leaning heavily on Mrs. Eckert. Is it right to give that message? Okay. Any other reports, or are we ready to move on? Okay. We're going to start another presentation from the Fieldstone Middle School recognition. I'm going to hand it over to Mrs. Eckert.
I'm going to ask that Mr. Solo come up. And just like we're very proud of our students always and how they just are so wonderful in so many ways, academic, musically, athletically, we also have a great staff in North Rockland, and that's part of the secret to our success. And many of them on a daily level just go above and beyond what their jobs are to make lives better for the students, for their colleagues, for our community. And tonight we're very honored to just recognize one of those people that on one particular day certainly went above and beyond his call of duty to make life better for a student in our district. So I'm going to turn it over to his principal, and there's a correction on the agenda. It should say Fieldstone Middle School, not Farley Elementary.
Thank you, Mrs. Eckert. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. In the middle school, I have many terrific employees who go above and beyond to ensure that students are not only getting a quality education, but here at North Rockland have a quality way of life. Many of them are at the forefront, and who we're recognizing today is an individual who, like so many, is what I consider to be an unsung hero. They don't often have the microphone in front of them. They don't often end up on the webpage or doing things like that. But their impact on your children is obviously just as important. A few weeks ago, we had a student, unfortunately, that misplaced their retainer in the garbage in the middle school. And I'm not sure if many of you have spent time in the middle school cafeteria, but there's a remarkable amount of garbage produced in a very short period of time. And perhaps I'm extra sensitive to this because I have one daughter in braces and another one heading that way very quickly. But the cost of the retainer can be remarkably significant. Mr. DiVincenzo, Christopher in the back, is one of our custodians who, upon hearing about this, rather than simply going about his normal course of action, his day of work, and fulfilling all his regular responsibilities, instead chose the time to basically take the better part of an hour and a half rummaging through the various garbage cans to find the retainer. And we were very proud to say that he did retrieve the item for the student and for the family. And Chris, for that, we're remarkably appreciative. And thank you so much for your family being here.
It's great to see our staff just always goes through that extra effort. It pays off. So congratulations, Chris.
Mr. Masiello, I just want to say, as a parent of children who had retainers, they cost a lot of money to replace. So I'm sure the parent whose child that was is very grateful that they did not have to replace that retainer, but they do cost a lot of money to replace.
and kids tend to take their retainer
And put it in
in napkins. So God bless you, because you had a lot of digging to go through.
And let me tell you, I replaced a lot of retainers and they cost a lot, so thank you. On behalf of the parents who didn't have to pay that.
Thank you. Thank you.
And now we'll move on to recognition of students that also make us extremely proud. You saw an example of some of our musicians at the high school level. Our students are always well represented in the whole county, whether it's the intermediate, the junior, or the senior all-county festivals. And not so long ago, we recognized the group, and tonight we're recognizing, and I don't see a lot of them here. A lot of them might be working at Tech Week in the play, and others might have gone a little confused or forgotten with the snow day yesterday. But we will certainly get it into the record since this is recorded. And if they're not here, I'm going to turn them over either to Mrs. Stellato or Mr. Solo to distribute. So what we'll do is we'll read all the names, and then if you're here, please come down when your name is called, and then stay here and we'll get a picture, and then we'll get the certificates to you.
Okay, so from our ninth graders, junior all county is for 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. From the high school in the band, Sophia Andrievsky, Ashley Barron, Helen Lee, Joel Minoj, and Mallory Sims. From the orchestra, Roni Cruz, Daniela Palomaro. And in the mixed chorus, Grace Verlenza, Kayla Lent, Sophia Nardone, you just saw on stage, we know where she is. Sravanth Mala, Armando Mendez, and Christopher Victor. I'm pretty sure they are all involved somehow in the show. Okay, here you go. Okay, and our Farley students, 7th and 8th graders, if any of you are here, please come on down. In the band, Giuseppe Colella, Aiden Falcone, Katya Fodor, Connor Hoban, Kaylee Colasar, Annalise Olson, Marcella Troncoso. In the orchestra, John Despaltro, Olivia Kohler, Nellie Lopez, William McGuire, Giuseppe Perez. And in mixed chorus, Donovan Elsius, Amani Alonso, Joel Aquino, Jordan Baez, Elijah Bonet, Emmanuel Bueno, Sofia Carlavaro, Edward Signa, Jeremy Cruz, Gerardo Del Cid, Deborah Estevin, Daniel Flores, Brianna Lent Rivera, Jackie Lynn, Danielle Margolis, Madison Miley, Christopher Molina, Nicholas Morgan, Lisa Prestopino, Thomas Cross, Nellie Ramos, Randy Stephen, Annalise Rios, Jaden Rios, Emmanuel Rodriguez, Nyla Rosario, Andrew Rose, and Jaylene Zanin. Congratulations to all of them, and thank you for representing us so well. Ms. Lang, come on down here.
You know, students who do so well, and when we talk about Old County, I always compare that to if you're in sports, being in sections. These are the best music students in the county. And we have 8 school districts, so there's a lot of competition. We have a phenomenal music program in the county in all 8 districts, so it's very competitive to be selected for the Old County group. So really, congratulations. I know how much time all of you put in being able to be at that level of excellence, and to the parents who support them as well and driving them to rehearsals and different practices, and also to our music department. We're very blessed to have just phenomenal, professional music teachers that give up a lot of their own time to make sure that our students are able to get into these different experiences and competitions. So thank you all.
Hey, Mrs. Eckert, it seems like only a week ago we had a board presentation, a budget presentation. So, it was only a week ago. Okay, but we'd love to see it again.
Yes, we are not offended. We know that the kids have an early morning, so when we honor students, please don't feel that you have to stay. We welcome you to stay. I'll be presenting on the upcoming budget, but please know that we are not insulted if you get up and go home, because we know that you have homework to do. You have to get up early in the morning, so we thank you for coming, and we are not at all upset if you have to go. I'll just say that and take a minute to let you do that.
Unless, of course, you're going to be an accountant or anything in finances. But thank you, students. I'm afraid that I'm going to have to sing to entertain you in the meantime, Mrs. Eckert. Threw me a curve. Oh, no, here she is. Good thing. Okay, never mind.
I'll just say, starting out, Debbie and I went to Albany on the school board's lobby and met with a lot of people there, and certainly voiced our concern and heard very definite from Senator Skoufis about his support for trying to get a permanent fix for our tax situation. And now on Sunday, Monday, and we just came back this afternoon, Chris and I were at the superintendent's conference, and I had the opportunity to meet Shelley Meyer, who is now the Senate Education Committee chairperson. And I was very impressed. I never met her. I've heard of her, and that she is very well versed on school issues and very supportive of school funding, especially getting the foundation formula to where it should be. I have to say I was very impressed by her knowledge of school issues and in the governor's budget. And at one point, someone from the floor, when she was taking questions, brought up the issue of a lot of development that's coming into Westchester, Rockland, and other parts of the state, and that these big developers are asking for pilots, and then as soon as the pilots expire, they're filing tax certs, and that those tax certs are very, impact our budgets very negatively and are causing an issue. And her answer to that was something to the effect that, yes, she's aware of that, and that she's been working with Senator Skoufis, who has a district with a very impactful tax certiorari situation. So at the end of the meeting, I went up to her and introduced myself, and I said, I want to thank you for your support of public education, And I wanted you to put a face on that district. I'm the superintendent of Havasu Stony Point, where that largest tax cert in the state exists. And I do appreciate any help that and support that you can give Senator Skoufis. So we know that he's working very hard with his colleagues and that they are all very aware of our situation. So that was just good to hear. Oh, that's okay. All right, we start with this, and you've seen it at our last meeting, and we know that we hear a lot of rhetoric coming out of Albany sometimes, how there's more being spent on education than ever before, and that foundation aid is being increased more than ever before. And you know, I don't doubt that the dollars are increasing, but we know that the governor's budget, when he says increasing $1 billion in education funding, it doesn't all come to foundation aid. Most of it goes to either the Big Five or projects that he wants to get accomplished in schools. So if we look at the true foundation aid increase, which is like that mustard color, you'll see from 2012 till today, what the increase really in just foundation aid, which is the money that gets distributed through that state formula, through the 700 districts in the state, how it's gone. And we see a very large increase, what apparently when they stop paying the GEA restoration, because that's what you see in the reddish. Remember that we had money frozen, then money actually taken away from what was there in foundation aid, and then eventually restored. And that's the red part. And once they finish restoring that, then there seems to be a large foundation aid in 2017, 2018. And then from there on, we actually see a decline in foundation aid. So you really have to search through the numbers and through the rhetoric of what gets published to really know what they're really funding and what they're really paying for. The last year's aid that ended up in 618 million really started at 338 also. That was his recommended aid, if you remember, for a foundation aid increase, and then the legislature took it to where it ended up. We know that, I know we heard it when we went with school boards in terms of the conflict that exists with the presumed deficit at the state in terms of revenue. She made that very clear too, that not all the parties agree as to where that deficit is and how they're going to, you know, make the budget whole. So there's a lot of conversation still about that in Albany.
Yeah, Mrs. Eckert, and I just want everyone to be aware that apparently on Monday or over the weekend, they negotiated for 36 hours because the legislature and the governor cannot agree on the actual amount of revenue, which kind of boggles my mind because I'm well versed in municipal finance and I don't know how you don't know exactly how much revenue you have. But they cannot agree, and the governor walked away from the table after 36 hours of negotiation and punted it to the state controller. So this is not good for schools at all. If they can't agree on the revenue, then they can't agree on the increase, and we can't stay at $318 million or $338 million, because what we know and what we learn from school boards is that 50% of that $338 million goes to New York City, 14% goes to Long Island, and the remainder of that money gets split between the rest of the school districts, which is why Rockland County is only coming in with like a 0.08 increase in funds. So we really have to stay on top of this and put the pressure on where we can. And I'm sure Senator Skoufis, who's put all of his eggs in the North Rockland political basket, is probably very well versed. So I would think whatever information we can give him from our end would be really helpful at this time.
Yeah, he was well aware of what our increase, and we'll see in a minute out of that 338, what becomes our piece. But foundation aid, again, if you look at the districts in Rockland, and Debbie, you just alluded to the districts in Rockland, and we'll see in a minute where we stand, but in terms of foundation aid, we have the second lowest percentage of that being fully funded. So what we're receiving is 41 million. We should be, if we were fully funded, receiving 73 million. So we're really receiving about 56% of our entire aid. So we're the second in the county in terms of receiving the least amount of money, and have the second largest shortfall, second only to Nanuet. Nanuet is receiving 45% of its aid, so they're being shorted about 54%. We're receiving 56, and we're being shorted about 44%. So, and you see there where everybody else falls. It's interesting to know that when we look at wealth ratio, South Orangetown is the wealthiest district in the county based on their combined wealth ratio, yet they're receiving 82% of their state aid. So it's very interesting how that formula works, or in my mind, doesn't work.
And they're losing enrollment. I mean, I don't like to throw my friends in South Orangetown under the bus, but they're losing enrollment. We are not losing enrollment. Our enrollment stays pretty steady. So when you look at a per pupil number, their number is going to be really inflated because they're losing kids.
Right.
We asked Thursday, I was at Westchester delegation. The Westchester delegation was there. Andrea Stewart Cousins came late, and she said that people have been coming to her because for years the Senate was Republican and John Flanagan was from Long Island, and people felt that the money was being funneled to Long Island. And she said now she's under a lot of pressure because she's from Westchester. People are saying that the money should be funneled to Westchester. And she went there, and I thought she handled it very well. She said, we're looking for, to fix the formula, not to take a broken formula and just keep it and just put it someplace, but, break it and keep it broken somewhere else. So she said, we can't do it overnight, but we're looking to take the formula and try to make it equal across the state, fair across the state. So that's what she went on record.
And we have to remember that they're also using the 2000 census. So it's almost 20 years old. I mean, our populations all over the state, our populations have changed drastically in terms of ENL learners, in terms of special ed populations, in terms of poverty. So, I mean, it's data that's 20 years old. Rich?
Foundation aid, that's a set amount. So if we end up with 200 more students next week, we're not getting additional aid. Am I correct?
Right.
But districts that are losing student enrollment, again, we're not pitting us against somebody else. That's not the point of this discussion. However, they still maintain the same amount of financial aid, so the ratios work out much better.
Yes. Yes.
So how about with special education? If it's a special education type students?
Again, they're working with data from the 2000 census. So it's very dated information.
The other percentage that they were talking about Thursday is the pupil number and the regional cost. And they were saying if the regional cost for Rockland and Westchester was the same as Long Island or New York City, it's not, it's lower. And the point is, there's no difference between Rockland, Westchester, and Putnam than there is between Nassau and Suffolk. So why are we a lower regional cost? Because everybody's much. And they had, data that proved that. And if you do that, if you do raise that number, it's not by a lot, it would drive money in. So those are numbers that we should be looking at too.
The state aid proposal as it stands today, and we always give the disclaimer that we know this is only the governor's proposal at this point. I know that both houses have their budgets due next week, I think on the 13th. And then we know that the 3 people in the room negotiation begins, and we know that it could end up at a different place, but we only have the numbers that we have. The important numbers here are really, if you go all the way to the right-hand side, the governor basis runs, is where you see subtotal and you come across what we're supposed to get out of that 338 million. North Rockland's piece of that pie is $12,055.
The joke.
because then the building aid, but I remind you, building aid is money that's already committed. Those are the bonds that we're paying. Those are the Excel bonds, the building bonds that we have. So that money is really based on reimbursable aid on what you're paying. So that's an additional 37,000, but again, that's accounted for in payments that have to be made. So our total aid, even if you include our building aid, is a whole whopping $50,000 extra, which is, 0.08 of a percent. The 12,000, you can't even calculate a percent on that. It's so minuscule. So this is what concerns us, because we also, just this week, got our letter from our health insurance carrier, and our healthcare costs alone are going up 9% on a single and 12% on a family plan. So, this doesn't even begin to cover what our healthcare increase is, just that bill alone. But this is where we stand. Based on that governor's proposal, we're due to get an additional $12,000 next year in foundation aid. So we keep track of this chart just because the state provides the information. And I know that the governor's new take on this is that he doesn't owe anybody any money, that was an old settlement, and that we're starting from scratch, and that this doesn't really mean anything. But like Shelley Mayer said, there is stature on this, and that was a legitimate court case, and that was settled, and it was won, and it's in the books, and that money is there, that it's supposed to be accounted for, and districts were supposed to be made whole. So our being made whole is $140 million, because that doesn't even include the GA, which we know is never coming back to us, and we lost another 30 million there. So if you put those two together, we're up to about $170 million that since 2009-10, in the last 10 years, should have been coming to the district. That's an average of 17 million a year, and has not come. If you want to take a look at just your shortfall in CFE, it's still 14 million a year that should have been coming that hasn't come. So we know those are tough numbers to then overcome on a budget when you're expecting and should be getting funded that according to a court order that said this is what fairly New York State should be paying for the education of children in the state. We didn't make up that number.
Mr. Secretary, I'm just wondering, I've heard that come from Albany. I mean, we had the court case. How can the governor say verbally, maybe he hasn't said it in writing, that, okay, I'm changing the rules, I don't really owe that? I mean, it's something that was finalized.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Peggy, because you're probably, and Debbie, much more well-versed on this, but the court can impose what the state had to pay. But the court did come up with a recommendation as to, based on all the evidence that was presented, what it felt it was fair for the state to contribute toward the education of kids. That's why they're able to ignore it, because the court can't impose that payment. But the court said, based on what has been presented in this case, this is what districts should be funded as.
And not only did the court come up with the number, but state ed then took the number and put the number into the runs, which is how we can keep track of exactly how much we're owed. But I don't believe that the court can impose the governor to make that payment.
As somebody who was an ancient attorney in California when Governor Reagan, you've heard of that guy, right, was governor, and we sued. I was not the leader, I was a beginner, and won. What the court can do, actually it wasn't even the defendant come up, because this is ancient history, you can hold the governor in contempt. That's just 2 cents. That's not what the court is going to do. They're not going to hold them in contempt and say, until you comply with this, or even the state senators, that's the unfortunate reality of this. You cannot just grant money out of the tax levy or the taxes. That's where the court is. It's like any tiny little case that people don't obey the rule in. Unfortunately, it's the state officials. So that's where we are.
I guess I never understood that the court made a recommendation. I mean, I always thought it was a decision.
It was the Constitution said you have to appropriate public education. And so the ruling was trying to decide what does that look like and what would that cost? And that's what the court litigated, and that's what they came up with.
What the court didn't do, Mr. Masiello, is say that the set a per pupil amount to cover the cost of a free and appropriate public education. The court stopped before doing
I mean, it's just general. Could we, the fact that they're still using the 2000 census, not even the 2010, much less this issue of putting it aside, the question about citizenship, which could be on the current census, because that may discourage people from filling out the form. Do we have much information where we could compare the nature of our students in 2000 to our current group? I mean, I understand we're not going to be the ones who get money because of that, but we have many more special ed kids. We have many more free and reduced price lunch kids, I believe. I mean, I don't have
Yes, we do.
statistics to show at least, you know, where we could show where we stand as a district and where this is not the kind of information. This is ancient data which should not be used for this district at least. I mean, many districts could show the same thing. But I think we're frankly in an extreme position where we could really demonstrate a whole different makeup of our student population.
We could research that, and even using the census, we know is just a fault reading, because even on the 2010 census, where we were a little higher than the 2000 census, there was a grant for the federal government, and it said you needed 25% poverty. And I was talking to Miggy, I said, Miggy, we qualified. We're at that point, we were at 40 something. And I said, we should apply for it. And we did. And then we got a call back from state ed, from the Title I office. And they said, oh, you guys don't qualify. And we said, what do you mean? We're at 45%. And they said, no, your poverty rate is 17. That was based on the 2010 census. So we know that we have now today about 55% of our population that gets free or reduced lunch. But if you look at the 2010 census, we're probably at 17% poverty. So, because we know that not everybody sends back the census. And so it's just very faulty information that all of this is based on. Right. Yeah, we could try to locate that, just how we compare to 2000. A little research.
I think that should be sent to.
Yes, yes. This slide put together by Rockland County School Boards when they went for their lobby day, and they did a great job in putting together a lot of, great data. But this one in particular, we found really interesting because it shows in red the 8 districts in Rockland County and how we compare in terms of our wealth ratio, our combined wealth ratio, to the foundation aid increase to the foundation aid owed. And if you see, North Rockland, as we have said in the past, has the lowest combined wealth ratio, even below the state average, which is 1. And I think we dropped to even 0.74 this year. But yet we're owed the largest amount of foundation aid. So again, how this formula works or doesn't work, it certainly doesn't work for the 8 school districts in Rockland County, because some of the other districts that are much wealthier, much above the state average in their wealth ratio, have been made whole and then increased on their foundation aid. So they're not owed anything, and they've received increases on top of that. A sample again of school districts that have been over or underfunded, and Mike and Rose put this together, and it's a great chart. It compares some of your, again, wealthiest districts, and it shows everything in the green is money that they've received above their foundation aid. Everything that you see in red, and you see some of the poorer districts in upstate New York, are owed a lot more. So we didn't get a chance, but we're going to put ourselves there too, just to show in comparison how we compare. But it just shows the inequity throughout the state. It's not just Rockland County. But throughout the state, this formula is just not working. It's not working the way it's supposed to be. It's certainly not making public education equitable for children across New York State. And really, there should be a big push legislatively to be a little more fair and equitable in terms of state aid distribution. Our tax cap calculation for this year, again, we have put the last couple of years just as a point of comparison to where we've been since 2014-15 and where we are this year. Again, our growth last year was very good with the new line that went in and really increased the tax base growth factor. This year's growth factor was much lower. You see it in red there on the right-hand side, all the way on the top. When we plug all our numbers in, we end up with a tax levy allowable increase of 2.5% or a dollar amount of $3.7 million in terms of new money allowed to be raised in a levy for next year. And this, again, is very confusing to taxpayers, and we understand it because the governor still, after all these years, continues to call it a 2% tax cap. We know that it is not a 2% tax cap. First of all, it's not a cap on your taxes, it's a cap on your levy, which are two very different numbers. And we know that it could be anything, in our case, from a negative 0.05% to 4.9 as it was last year. And we're still staying within the cap. So it's very confusing, and even after 5 years, it still continues to be very confusing for taxpayers. We know that the tax cap was expiring this year, and the governor has a big push to make it permanent. I know that all of our groups are lobbying very hard to say, if you're making it permanent, you have to have some fixes to it, because you can't have, there's no way that districts can really plan when 1 year you might have a negative cap, another year you have an increase of 5%, the next year you have 2, the next year you have 1. You know, a steady increase would help us plan, would help taxpayers plan, but the way the formula, again, their formula making in the state needs a lot to be desired. But the way the formula operates now, it really fluctuates like you never want budgets to fluctuate that way. Good budgeting means that you should have a slow and steady growth if you need it, but it should be, you know, reliable, and people should know what to expect. You don't want these peaks and valleys. That's not good budgeting. So you know, it certainly is not very helpful.
I just want to also say that that 2.5 doesn't necessarily mean that the taxpayers can assume there's a 2.5% increase in their taxes, because once you factor in two towns or equalization rate, if anyone is interested in reading up on how that works on our district website, the Board of Education, it kind of explains it. I think
Yes.
you need a PhD in nuclear physics from MIT to figure it out, but it kind of explains how that works out. How sometimes one town,
Yes.
we could have a 2% increase, in one town we only see a 0.5% increase, in another town we see a 6% increase, and say, well, I thought it was a 1%.
Right. And it has to do with the new growth, with assessed values in those two towns, and how they compare to each other. So yes, when you have districts that have various towns or municipalities in them, that tax rate could certainly fluctuate between those two towns. And it does constantly between Haverstraw and Stony Point. Our proposed budget heading into next year, our rollover budget is an increase of $4 million. And you'll see here where our revenues come from. The tax levy increase of $3.7 million, the governor's state aid, the state aid for the conversion of kindergarten. Next year we drop to 65% of that total aid. We have the miscellaneous based on tuition, on rentals, on interest. We have the NRG pilot that we know it's got a couple more years outside of our assessment base. And what we're using in fund balance. So that's a number that actually makes me happy this year, because if you remember just a few years ago, we were at a very scary number of using 24 million in fund balance, and it was eating up our fund balance very quickly. Our goal, we said collectively, was to, you know, do budgeting that would reduce that amount to a sustainable level. And the more we reduce that, the more that we could stretch our dollars that are left in fund balance to cover that amount over multiple years and not bring that cliff that we are all trying to avoid. With a failed budget, however, you know that the levy has to remain the same. So the board has an option at that point. If it comes to that we could put the budget up a second time. If it doesn't pass that second time, then you cannot collect that additional revenue. There's no contingency budget provision. So at that point, the board would have to make some decisions in terms of that 3.7 million, whether to increase from that 5.4 that we're using in reserves for part of that. Part of it would be in reductions, or all of it could be an increase in what we're using in reserves, or all of it could be reductions that are made to the budget. So at that point, obviously, we have more conversations with the board in terms of some recommendations of where we may finally end up. This also doesn't include any additional revenue from state aid. We are still hopeful that that $12,000 will come up somehow. And of course, we're also hopeful that there is some kind of fix for our Myron debt. So if any of those things happen, obviously, this situation and these numbers could change. Again, tax levy and fund balance history, and all the numbers are there for people to look at. But to me, the important thing is our historical always, keeping an eye on, being respectful to our community. Our community, I always like to say, and I said it to Shelley when she said, oh yeah, I know Haverstraw, it's a great community. I said, it certainly is. It's a working class community that is very supportive of its schools and education, but they've been given a really tough nut to crack with this tax cert. But all of us, and when I say all of us, our bargaining groups, our employees, I think many of them live in our community. They have understood what we're facing, and that we're all collectively trying to keep the excellence of the schools that we operate. And over the years, if you take a look at the last 13 years since the settlement, our average budget change has been 1.84. So we ourselves have imposed a 2% tax cap on ourselves for many years and have tried to do everything we can to bring those numbers to a level that our community can sustain. And when you look at the average tax levy change, it's still not even 1%. Remember, for many years, we had a decrease in the levy because we used reserves to decrease the levy so that people could absorb that shift that happened. It wasn't just the increase, but the shift of who was paying for the Myron gap. Yeah, the business and homeowner shift. So those numbers are, pretty respectable, I think, and it does show our community that we're trying hard to keep the budget numbers contained. Again, just a simple reminder of that Myron debt. We know that the shift of commercial to residential, you'll see it there from 2007, commercial properties accounting for 60% of the levy and residential 40%, and that today, that shift is even, worse than it was back then. Commercial properties are paying now 32%, and residentials are picking up 68%. So it would be great to have some more commercial property in our community to kind of offset that shift again. We know that the total debt, when you add the interest to that 224 million, it really turns into 369,284,964. To date, our children, because it's come from their educational dollars, have paid 157,046,164 for the past 10 years. We still owe 212,238,800. We know that the debt runs through 2037. The annual payment is 11,450. Mike has just worked with our bonding people because we think we could reduce that other 50 million that's callable now, and we could save about $1.7 million for the remainder of that 50 million. So we'll, it doesn't seem like a lot when you're facing those numbers, but any little bit helps reduce that. So we will go out and rebond those to save that 1.7 million for the remainder of the life of those bonds. And again, advocacy to date, Mike and I met with our newest representative, Colin Schmidt. He was very gracious, met with us for about an hour. We really wanted to bring him up to date and share with him the same information that we have shared with our other elected officials, and made sure that he was well versed on the whole Myron situation, on the whole payment, on what our community has done to be able to survive this debt, and how creative we've been over the years in terms of different solutions to try to stretch those reserve dollars. And he said that Assemblyman Zabrowski and Senator Skoufis had certainly spoken with him and tried to bring him up to date as to the solution, and that he certainly would be working with them to try to find a permanent solution for North Rockland. And that's it. We're getting closer and closer. We submitted our levy amount. It had to be submitted by state regulation, you know, March 1st. And we're heading to the home stretch here, we know, with our budget season. Questions?
Yes, would you be proposing what we would have to cut? Doesn't go out on the next budget?
We would, yes.
Maybe.
We have to. We have to give notice to our different bargaining groups if there are any reductions in employment in any of the bargaining group, and we certainly always want to be fair to the people that work for us. If they're not going to have a job, we certainly want to let them know as soon as possible so that they can start looking, and you know, obviously, hopefully, we still don't know what the retirements might be. As we do every year, we look at those retirements first and see if we could make ourselves whole through attrition so that we don't affect anybody who's actually working. But, you know, that's not always possible. So once the retirements start coming in, then we'll be better able to see where we can match things up and then make recommendations to the board in terms of any additional cuts that might have to take place. And we'll also get some guidance from you in terms of, do you want it all out of cuts? Do you want to increase what we're using out of reserves to mitigate some of those reductions?
You have to issue the recommendation, so that would probably be April.
That will probably be April's meeting.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have questions?
This will be available on our website.
It'll be posted on the website tomorrow, yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Decker. Okay, so any old business? Okay. Is there any correspondence? Correspondence. Okay, and I understand no one has signed in for public, so I can save my speech. Very good. So we're on to the next item, which is retirements. And we're going to ask Mr. Fernandez if you can read the first.
Marafino, whereas Ms. Teresa Marafino has served the North Rockland Central School District with dedication for a total of 19 years and 7 months, and whereas she has submitted her resignation for retirement purposes, therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, hereby accepts with deep regret the resignation of Teresa Marafino, teaching assistant, effective April 28, 2019. And be it further resolved that the Board of Education wishes Ms. Marafino and her family much happiness in the future.
Very good. May I have a second by the whole board? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Is Marafino available? Okay. Wish her much luck in the future. Mr. Krause.
Joseph Marina. Whereas Mr. Joseph Marina has served the North Rockland Central School District with dedication for a total of 15 years. And whereas he has submitted his resignation for retirement purposes, therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, hereby accepts with deep regret the resignation of Joseph Marina, school social worker, effective June 30th, 2019. And be it further resolved that the Board of Education wishes Mr. Marina and his family much happiness in the future.
Very good. May I have a second by the entire board? Excellent discussion.
I would just like to say, I know work that I do, my professional life, I have had the opportunity to work with children. And I'm so impressed with the work that our staff does, our social worker does. They were helping place families. They were actually pounding the pavements and looking for places for people to live. And some of the services that are in the county don't quite work as hard. And I know that over Christmas break, for example, he was out again pounding the pavement looking for an apartment for a family, a district family that their child had special needs, and the placement that the county was giving was really inappropriate for the child. And so we'll miss him terribly, and I just want to thank him for his dedication to our families and our students.
I would have to add to that, Mr. Romano, that I remember him, when I was working in Helen Hayes, I remember the outstanding service that he provided to some of the students that were going in and out of the hospital, the rehab hospital, and it just is amazing to see his performance and how dedicated he is. So I would almost wish that I can oppose this, but and give him another 15 years sentence. But in any event, okay. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. And Mr. Marino's not here, but let's give him another round of applause. Okay, Mrs. Sickerby, would you like to read?
Carol Nirenberg, whereas Ms. Carol Nirenberg has served the North Rockland Central School District with dedication for a total of 21 years, and whereas she has submitted her resignation for retirement purposes, therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, hereby accepts with deep regret the resignation of Carol Nirenberg, school social worker, effective June 30th, 2019. And be it further resolved that the Board of Education wishes Ms. Nirenberg and her family much happiness in the future. Can I just ask about that? It says in the body of the thing, school social worker, but it says up at the top, special education.
She's a special education teacher.
So then we just have to fix the body. This is amended.
Right.
So if I move the motion as amended.
Okay, thank you. May I have a second by the whole board?
Yes.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. I'd like to wish Mrs. Nirenberg a very happy retirement. It's formed by several people. Now, Mrs. Romano is to read this land.
I'm quite honored and saddened in a way, but very happy for Diane Lang and her family. Just gonna give my note. Okay. Diane Lang has been just the most amazing music teacher for 34 years in our district. The work that she does with our children during the school day is phenomenal. Based on the number of children that we have that attend all county area, all state, and we've had students that have been to all Eastern, students that Diane herself has worked with. The level of musicianship that she teaches them and hard work, and she pushes her kids and she demands a lot, and it shows. It shows when our kids, perform outside the district, but you can see the concerts and the progression of our children. It has always amazed us, and I know Mrs. Ecker finds a great joy in that as well. Personally, Diane has just made an incredible impression on my own children, and I know not just my own. She goes above and beyond my kids got to see their first opera because Diane Lang and her husband took a bunch of kids down and they opened so many children to a world that they maybe never would have experienced. I am so grateful, both as a parent, as a member of the community, and as a member of the board, that we have such dedicated teachers in our district. So I will read your retirement now. Whereas Miss Diane Lang has served the North Rockland Central School District with dedication for a total of 34 years, and whereas she has submitted her resignation for retirement purposes, therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, hereby accepts with deep regret the resignation of Diane Lang, special subject music teacher, effective June 30th, 2019. And be it further resolved that the Board of Education wishes Ms. Lang and her family much happiness in the future.
That is the motion, and may I have second by the whole board?
Yes.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. And Ms. Lang, are you on it? Good luck, Mrs. Lang, in the future. Okay, we're moving on to action items. And Ms. Gaddy, I didn't want to skip you before, so would you mind?
School Social Work Week, March 3rd through the 9th, 2019. Whereas school social workers have the right education and experience to guide individuals, families, and communities through complex issues and choices. And whereas social workers connect individuals, families, and communities to available resources. And whereas social workers are dedicated to improving the society in which we live. And whereas social workers are positive and compassionate professionals. And whereas social workers stand up to make sure everyone has access to the same basic rights, protection, and opportunities. And whereas social workers help people help themselves whenever and wherever they need it most. And whereas social workers have been the driving force behind important social movements in the United States and abroad. Now therefore be it resolved that the North Rockland Board of Education proclaims March 3rd through the 9th, 2019 as Professional School Social Work Week and calls upon all citizens to join with the National Association of Social Workers and the North Rockland Central School District in celebration and support of school social work and the social work profession.
Thank you, Ms. Gaddy. May I have a second by the whole board? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. The next item is World Language Week, and Ms. Meany.
Thank you.
Can't leave you alone.
World Language Week, March 11th through 15th.
Your microphone, please. I'm sorry.
World Language Week, March 11th through the 15th, 2019. Whereas the study of classical and modern languages, over 5,000 in the world, enhances our understanding of people, ancient and modern. And it is important that Americans learn to speak the languages of other peoples and times. And whereas the United States, a nation of immigrants, has historically benefited from the contributions of people born other countries gifted in all the careers that affect the quality of each citizen's life: medicine, science, technology, the arts, education, sports, government, etc. And whereas the current demographic patterns of our nation predict the fastest increase in population growth of Latinos, parentheses, Spanish speakers, Asians, and speakers of over 150 languages and dialects, creating a majority, minority, non-white population by 2040. And whereas learning the languages and cultures of the countries with whom our nation's economics and business depend empowers our leaders with knowledge and skills for making the best decisions and is crucial to the defense of our nation. And whereas the benefit of studying another language is to experience the process of second language acquisition to realize how long it takes to achieve fluency in the language, perhaps making students more tolerant and patient for recently arrived immigrants who will need that same time. And whereas knowledge of other languages allows greater access to information, resulting in increased choice of resources and a richer base of knowledge. And whereas communicating with people from any community in the world happens on a daily basis by students through the internet, making cross-cultural communication skills an invaluable asset, preparing them for a successful future. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the North Rockland Board of Education and the Superintendent of Schools recognize the celebration of National World Language Week, March 11th through the 15th, 2019, and encourages all residents of the community to recognize the richness of our language and cultural diversity.
Thank you, Ms. Manini.
I'm taking the shortcut.
That was the second time in a row that you got the longest.
You're really getting me.
Just want to let you know that your initiation is now complete. May I have a second by the whole board?
Yes.
Good, any discussion? Mr. Fernandez?
Yeah, with this action item, I'm not sure where we got this from. I'm not opposed to what it's saying there, so I'm all in favor of this. However, this was written by some wordsmen who put themselves right and it's being allowed. Because a lot of this is a continuation. I think we should maybe look into revisiting this.
It comes from the Association of Foreign Language Districts.
Yeah,
It's only 1 week a year, right?
right, yeah, but it's just, it's good, so.
It may be from an attorney.
Yeah.
No. With all the whereas. Any discussion? Further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Okay, next item is the consent agenda. Use of the consent agenda permits the Board of Education to make more effective use of time by adopting a single motion to cover those relatively routine matters which are included. Any member of the board who wishes to discuss a particular piece of business on the agenda, consent agenda, may so indicate, and that item will be transferred to the regular agenda for consideration in a separate vote, thus preserving the right of all board members to be heard in any issue. May I have a motion? Mrs. Gaddy, second by Mrs. Romano. Any discussion?
I just want to make sure that all the board members know that there's a couple of items that were added in that were not previously discussed.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Yes, and I'll just ask again if there's any further discussion. The items, okay. Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. I'm missing the adjournment page, but I know that I'd like to make a motion for adjournment. Mr. Kraus, second by Mrs. Manini. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you all for coming.